Welcome to CISO's Insiders Podcast, powered by GRC Consulting. In this podcast, we'll be interviewing leading CISOs and security leaders in the industry for light, eye-level conversations. Here, they share advice and tips, talk about their biggest accomplishments and failures, favorite drinks, key influencers, and much more. We encourage you to walk away with at least one insight that will help you better yourself or your business. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more content, please check us out on social media.
So welcome everybody. Today I'll be speaking with Jeramia Cohen. Jeramia is the current Chief Information Security Officer over at Simpatico. I know he's been passionate about his pursuit to mitigate ongoing cyber warfare threats. He's been working a lot with his partners and trying to get them secured and protected. I know that looking at your background, I see that you come from an IT technical background. You started all the way from, a help desk technician in your early career and, being elevated. And basically you started off as a help desk technician, moving your way up, assuming all kinds of IT related roles. To include virtual information security, virtual chief information officer, actually vCIO, and now CISO. I do think that you also offer some virtual CISO services as well. I see you have all kinds of certificates from CISSP, CEH, MCSC, MCSA, and whatnot. I'd be more than happy if you could step in, introduce yourself, maybe give a few words about Simpatico as well, and we can get started.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Pleasure to be here with you. Appreciate it. Yeah, Jeramia Cohen, Chief Information Security Officer with Simpatico Systems. We are a managed service provider and also a managed security service provider. We are headquartered in Lubbock, Texas. We have locations throughout the U.S. We've got one in Dallas and Los Angeles. Working on being kind of across the country. We service a variety of verticals. We're very agnostic. We service a lot of different verticals, so we have our eyes and hands in a lot of different things. Part of my role is playing that vCISO role with our customers. So it's a little bit of a challenge in that I'm dealing with the stuff day to day, but then also for our customers. So, but I enjoy the challenge. So again, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, it is definitely my pleasure. Absolutely. And yeah, I can imagine because I'm aware of some of these challenges as well, being a virtual CISO or a fractional CISO, working with multiple customers. It might be challenging, you're a part of the team, but you're not really a part of the team. And then, yeah, maybe we can talk a bit about that as well. But before we get started, I always like to ask a couple of icebreaker questions here. Can you share what's your favorite drink is?
Oh yeah, that's easy. I love bourbon. I love whiskey. Maker's Mark is at the top of my list right now, but I usually try to find some.
Which one? They have a few editions, I think, right? They have
just the regular. I haven't tried the latest one that's out, but I try to find like the obscure ones when I go into the alcohol emporium. But I try to find something obscure and test something a little bit different each time, just seeing what the flavors they add in. But definitely a whiskey is my go-to.
Yeah, same for me. I started experimenting with bourbon when I moved to the US like 2 years ago, and I have like maybe 3 or 4 right now that I'm checking. But yeah, I'm a whiskey kind of guy as well. Can you share a bit about your marital status?
Oh yeah, everybody always says happily. That's I feel like that's a precursor to making everybody believe that. But no, definitely married, going on 18 plus years at this point. Definitely married my best friend. So I'm happy in that.
Good. And thank you for sharing that. So basically, I'm gonna ask you a bunch of questions here. Again, the purpose of this podcast is basically to educate our listeners and tap into the minds of leading CISOs and virtual CISOs in the industry. identify trends and whatnot. So yeah, I think we can get started. If there's one thing you wish you'd known about your career before you began it, what would that be?
It's a good question, Ben. Honestly, the impact it had on my family. In the IT industry in general, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that can relate to it. At some points I felt like I was an on-call doctor. My personal life was gone. My wife and I had been married for a few years before we had kids, but that came along, and literally the job was so demanding of just being on call and supporting these systems, and from an IT engineering perspective and after hours support. I mean, it was literally, by the time I got home, had calls lined up and would work until 10, 11 o'clock at night, up again in the morning. And this went on for years. And it really just had a hefty impact on my relationship with my wife, with my children. I mean, there'd be days on end where I wouldn't get home until late and I wouldn't even see my children. I'd see them at night, kiss them, and they wouldn't even know I was there, and I was gone again in the morning. And so, that really was pretty heavy on me. Now, hindsight, was it all worth it? I definitely enjoyed it, but I think I would have made different decisions along the way about balancing, life and work along the way.
Yeah, and let me just ask you a follow-up question to that. What was your method in being able to take basically a step back and improve that work-life balance? Then, what made the change?
Well, I think just me maturing as I was young. I was younger, getting married, having kids, and in just that work role, and I was fearful, as many people can understand. And it was kind of like, I felt like if I didn't do it, I would be losing out on that opportunity, or I wouldn't be able to take care of my family. So it was very difficult. I found it hard to separate those two. And so there, like I said, it was many years of that. And then it really was seeing the impact it was having on my relationship, and really having to scale that back a little bit and stand my ground to my employer, whoever I was working with at the time. And just, I need that time back. I mean, I need, almost sometimes not even answering the phone, right? I mean, you try to create practices and habits for yourself, but again, the fear was a pretty big driver there. And if I don't respond, maybe I lose this opportunity. So it was difficult. It was a difficult choice to pick one or the other. And most of the time I think I chose wrong, but you have to figure out how to balance that and what's important to you.
So if there's a young professional out there now listening, what would be your tip to them? Like if they find themselves in a similar position to what you just described, what would be your tip to them?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, really it's establishing, again, an immaturity piece on my part is just really establishing that relationship with your employer, the company you're with up front. Really, and if you're working for a quality company, they should value your own life, that we call it balancing the needle. Really setting the expectation of, hey, this is what's important to me. I would rather have this freedom and my personal time over X. Maybe it's an increase in pay. I would have, if I could go back, I would have easily taken the time and the peace of mind over any sort of increase in pay. That's such short-lived, right? So just really set those boundaries and those guidelines up front and make sure everybody's on the same page. That way you at least have some sort of line of delineation of when we're going over and, when we're pushing that boundary a little bit, and everybody can be respectful of that.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. I think it's very important to put these boundaries and talk. Just talk to your boss. I mean, it's not something that you need to be afraid of. Okay, thank you. Moving on, what would you say your biggest failure was, and what did you learn from it?
Well, this is one of those like interview questions that's just very difficult to answer. I'm definitely as fallible as anybody else. And I really thought about what was it that was a mistake, or not even a mistake, but a failure. And really kind of about what I was just talking about. I was very naive in up and coming, in this industry, I definitely allowed myself to be taken advantage of a lot. I was very much, my work ethic is get the job done, ask questions later, do whatever it takes to get it done. I was prior military, I was in the Air Force for some period of time. That had a little bit of impact on me as well, but really it's just, let's get that done. And I was taken advantage of. So, from that, I learned to be careful about the level of trust that I instilled in the people I worked for, my employers, right? I was naive, but I learned not to instill so much trust in those people without having that communication we talked about, and really learning how to defend my value, came from that, about being so naive and being taken advantage of. And ultimately it made me aware now, 20 years into my career, that I have people that look to me as their mentor, even though I'm kind of ignorant to that. I don't realize that that's even happening, that I'm mentoring people, but that they're doing the same thing to me, and really how powerful or detrimental that relationship could be. And so it really helped me kind of, look at that through a different lens, and now from someone looking up from the other direction.
Okay, and thank you for that. And, having touched about your biggest failure, what would you say your biggest success was, if there is such a thing even?
Wow. Success. Yeah, I guess there's different levels of measuring success.
Yeah, it's a bit unscripted, but I was just curious. I mean, if you can.
Oh, no, I'm fine with that. I'm thinking, career, because that's what we're talking about, but I wouldn't say that that's necessarily, it's actually kind of in my personal life. My family and I had decided that we were really done with being in the rat race and being slaves to the system. And a few years ago, we actually gave away all of our possessions. I mean, we were doing fine. We gave away all of our possessions, found good homes for animals. We gave our children, who were 8 and 10 at the time, we gave them pretty large size duffel bags and said, whatever you can fit in here is what you can take. And we moved to the big island of Hawaii. We just grabbed our stuff, flew over there, found a place to rent. We essentially lived in a small little hut that was about 200, 300 square feet with, there wasn't really any power or hot water, and we figured it out. We got the kids into school. We found a place to live that was off grid, and basically established a life where we were completely off the grid. We had power, we had water. The only thing we were connected with was internet, and we were living simply. I didn't have to work as much. Very minimal to take care of our expenses. We were at the beach, snorkeling, doing all of these, things, hiking around the island, exploring the majority of our time. And really it was the model for, what we could do, really in humanity if we tried to, but as our family, that we could dismantle our life and then rebuild it and live simply. It's very scary to let go of that security blanket. And so that really taught us a lot. And our adventure's not over. We're essentially back in the system and connected to the grid, until the kids are old enough to get on their own and make their own decisions, because we don't want to make that for them. But, it may be in our future. So.
Wow, that's super interesting. So what made you come back, basically? I'm assuming the kids?
We had some, and this isn't anything really about the locals in Hawaii. It was more of the Americans that were there, a lot of military brats. There's a lot of drug issues. And in the particular area we were in, essentially the kids couldn't walk to the bus because we were fearful of the people that were, literally you would see a hole in the jungle and somebody would be living in there under a tarp. And then there was issues with the fog from the volcano, the volcanic fog was causing respiratory issues, and we were having rashes and breathing problems. My wife ended up in the hospital. It was pretty bad. And so we were just like, look,
got it.
Now's not the time. Now's not the place. We have small children. And so we basically came back and then we moved to Texas, and we've been here ever since, and reestablished our life. And now we're on a 2-acre ranch, and we still have that mentality in our mind. But that was what pushed us back here, was just our safety.
Wow, super interesting story, and thank you for sharing that. I know it's very personal. Yeah. If there is one thing you could do, I mean, when you look back at your career, is there something you would do differently, in your opinion?
Oh yeah, for sure. So, again, we're talking about immaturity and just naivety of coming up in the industry. Like, I was so focused on learning the skills for what my job was to be, that I didn't really understand the business. I didn't understand business in general. Like, I understand the basics, right? There's a boss, and people do things, and there's levels of things, and you kind of fit in your role and do your thing. But had so many opportunities of potential mentors in that area that I could have learned a lot from. And there were a few that I did, but that not understanding the business kind of narrowed my perspective down very small. And I was very much just kind of reactive to what I was doing and what my role was. And I really think that had I done that, it would have helped me excel in my career faster. Because once I got to start doing that, it really accelerated my career. And just brought me a lot of peace and harmony in my what I was doing and what I've worked so hard to do. So definitely understanding the business.
Yeah, and this has become a recurring theme, and I've heard that a lot. Not understanding the business when you begin your career, that's a common theme. So definitely, if there's one tip that I've learned so far, is the business always comes first. Not information security, not cybersecurity, not the latest firewall. The business comes first. Whatever it is that we're doing, we do it to support the business. Yeah, and this is very important. It's an important lesson. I think everybody should be aware of. And a lot of the security professionals out there, they're like self-learners, and I'm just curious, did you have like specific resources that have helped you along the way?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, starting in the beginning, really it was someone giving me a chance. I was still working on my bachelor's degree. I didn't have enough history or experience to even land a job. And actually somebody who I was going to school with was already kind of doing that, and they gave me a chance. And I learned more in that role in 6 months than I did in 4 years of working on getting my data communications degree. So that was key to get me started. And then the OJT, on the job training, for sure, that's key. If the place you're working for has a good training program, that was helpful. Having a company that supports that kind of that effort, certifications as well. I know there's a lot of talk about essentially certifications being maybe not frowned upon, but from some of the seasoned professionals, not looked at as having that experience, which I understand, but there's a level of knowledge of everything. It's like getting your degree in whatever, but until you're a rocket scientist, you're really not, and you're just on paper. So certifications were key. Really a lot of trial and error. That's how this job works. It's you try, you tweak it, it doesn't work, and what we joke around, what we call Google foo. It was a lot of Google foo. There was early in my career, I was just telling my daughter who's 12, how do you know all this stuff? I said, look, I Googled a lot of stuff for a long time until I started learning some basic skills. So yeah, those were pretty key in getting to where I am. But I am a sucker for education. I love to learn things. I love to learn a new skill. So those were all key for me.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. Can you name a few individuals that have been the most influential to you?
Well, and not to sound corny or that I'm trying to get, husband points, but really my wife has been pretty instrumental. She has supported me all along the way. She has, actually, she just walked in right now. She supported me through this career. I mean, there were periods of time where I wasn't, providing for the family. It was because I was trying to get jobs and going to school, and she was supporting me, and literally sitting in the parking lot sometimes of just, you can understand as a young couple. So my wife was very instrumental in helping me, giving me that boost to move forward. Another individual that I had mentioned when I said, somebody just giving me an opportunity, there was a good friend of mine. His name's David Cameron. He actually works for, I think, the city and back in California and LA.
I actually thought you meant the British PM, the previous British PM.
Oh yeah, was that his name? I didn't know.
I'm pretty sure David Cameron was the prime minister in England. I might be mistaken, but I think I'm not. I can Google it.
Yeah, you asked me my favorite drink, and my wife just brought me a. Nice. See, my wife is the one. But yeah, he was already kind of doing a little side hustle while we were in school and needed someone. He just gave me an opportunity. He's like, here's a laptop. Here's this. Like, I need you to go here. And it was a lot of sacrifice. I mean, I was literally driving, an hour and a half each way, 3 times a week, not getting paid anything to prove myself, to go work in a healthcare facility, managing Unix servers and some Windows servers, some Linux. I mean, it was crazy, but he really gave me an opportunity, and we're still in communication today, but he gave me a lot of breaks. So he was very, very influential in helping me get where I am. And another one is actually a person I work with now. His name's Corey Ruthhart. He's also a Simpatico. He's our CIO, our VP of Ops. Really, he's been my mentor. I mean, he helped kind of mold me and guide me in the right direction. He has a lot of extensive background in data center and technology. I mean, just brilliant guy, all around good guy. And he really took me under his wing and has guided me and helped me get where I need to go. And so he's been really influential in helping me get where I am.
Yeah, having a mentor, especially on the job, is super important in my mind. Yeah, and I know it's not always feasible, but it does help a lot. Is there any one common myth about the profession or the cybersecurity field that you wanted to debunk?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily about cybersecurity, but one of the kind of funny things that has always been a deal is when people, and you probably experienced this in your life, if they find out you do anything technical, like, yeah, I'm in cybersecurity or technology or computers, they basically assume that anything technology related, you're an expert in it. It's like, oh, you do that? Hey, my Casio calculator watch is, could you reprogram that? Or, hey, this thing in my car, my blue, I mean, it's just like, it's never ending. We're not all experts in everything technology. We understand technology, but we don't understand everything. There's just not enough time in the day or mental capacity to understand everything. But
so don't call us for support on your MacBook when it doesn't work, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a hint to my wife, but yeah.
Yeah, go to the Geek Squad.
Yeah, definitely. I'd rather pay the Geek Squad than trying to decipher what's going on in the Mac OS. Yeah. So can you tell me a bit about Simpatico, about the company? So I'm curious to understand what markets you operate in and what exactly does the company do? Sure.
So we're essentially in the SMB market, that small to mid-sized business. We're looking at customers, our sweet spot is 25 to 200 users for endpoints. But we also have some that are one, right? We've got people who have 1 or 2 employees. And so essentially we're a technology company. So, and by default, we're an MSP in that Simpatico is an amalgam of many different acquisitions and mergers that have happened over a period of time. There was a company called BAE Systems that's been around for a long time, which was a physical security, low voltage, all of that, hands-on, low voltage kind of stuff. And then there was this company, Ironfish, which the owner of our company, the founder of a company, had established because he just essentially out of the sheer I think I can do better than what I'm hearing all of my friends or people telling me that they're getting from IT support. So we started Ironfish, and then Ironfish and BAE became Simpatico Systems. And so that started that whole managed service provider of providing IT services, from a managed perspective of, basically all things IT, infrastructure, endpoints, data storage, all of the things that are essential, and the evolution of what MSPs have been, right? And that client server situation, now cloud. But we're providing those basic services for customers, from patch management, antivirus, all of the essentials that a business needs to function in this day and age, and obviously varying levels depending on what the customer wants. And since then, we've established our security, the security division of our company, which I lead up, which is the MSSP side. And so now we've kind of opened the market, and we've transitioned to being a cyber company, because essentially IT is going to become commoditized. It already is. It's with the use of the cloud. We've gone through so many evolutions of, really back in the day of being kind of client, that terminal and a mainframe, back in, IBM, to that client server environment, to now back to essentially, we just need very lightweight dumb terminals, or, inexpensive laptops or desktops to connect to the massive processing power. And so we established a security division of our company, and, we're providing essentials to small businesses. And it's very difficult to bring enterprise level tools down to the SMB market, because these tools weren't developed for that. So, a lot of the fancy shiny stuff that's out there, you've got to have minimums of 5,000 endpoints before they'll even work for you. So, a lot of my time is spent trying to establish relationships with vendors, which, I know we'll talk about at some point. But to bring that down to the SMB market that makes it make sense, makes it easily digestible, it's not cost prohibitive. And so we just work with the customer to be their partner. We're not looking for short-term gains. We want people that we can be literally long-time, lifetime partnerships with, to help them grow their business through technology.
Yeah, and you also offer then as a complimentary service, I'm assuming, right? You offer the virtual CISO service here.
Yeah, so we offer virtual CISO to, we tried to bundle it in, but we found that the smaller businesses don't find value in it, or really not even they don't find value. They don't have enough infrastructure or system or process, or even, a smidgen of governance, where having a CISO, really, I became a pain to them, right? Because I'm pushing on the sore spot of, they know they need to do these things. So we stopped including that in what we were doing by default. And so now we offer it to those organizations who are really looking for having that sort of fractional or virtual CISO, and that's been very successful. So
yeah, and I do agree with you. I mean, we also offer virtual CISO services, and I do agree that you have to have a minimum footprint before it makes sense to hire such a role. For the smaller organizations, it doesn't always make sense unless they have like some sort of a governing, they need to answer security questionnaire, they need to have all kinds of compliance calls with customers and whatnot. So, but otherwise, it's just an expense. They don't necessarily see the value in. Yeah. So can we talk a bit about the common challenges that you see your customers are faced with?
Yeah. I mean, that ties in perfectly. Again, we're in that SMB market, so it's different, right? We're not talking about multi-million-dollar budgets. We're not talking about, excessive cash flow that we could just pull from whenever we want for fancy shiny things. So really budgeting, right? I mean, I would say the majority of SMB executive leadership that I speak to, and I ask, what is your technology budget? And I get the same answer: whatever we need to spend money on. We basically ad hoc address that. And so there isn't really any foresight or planning, because, small businesses, it's, there's usually limited cash flow, and the money that we do have is going to be spent towards something that is generating revenue and not becoming an expense. So that's for sure probably number one on my list, because that kind of feeds everything else. The other thing is getting them to understand the direct relationship between their investment that they see as an expense, but that relationship between that investment and then the ROI, that return on investment they're going to get. And it really is, an educational thing, as you understand in providing vCISO services. There's a lot of, explaining value and being able to demonstrate that in simple terms. And so getting them to see that and what the big picture is definitely a challenge. There's a lot of small business owners who wear a lot of hats, and they're stretched thin. They're very thin as it is. So getting them to understand the technology, or to set aside a few minutes to just understand the core of what's running their business, to understand the systems, the ecosystem, where, potential failures could be or things that could impact their business. They just don't have the time to, to sit and understand that, or they flat out don't want to. And ultimately that ends up being a problem, because later on down the line, there's things that they could have been making, decisions they could have been making as a business that could have prevented a lot of things had they understood that infrastructure a little bit better. Which, like we're talking about here, having some, virtual or fractional CISO or CIO is key in that. And specifically related to security, the same thing, right? Their inherent risk with just having a business, being online, having a presence online, providing services. Their job is just to generate revenue, right? Like let's sell more, let's grow. But those security risks, as little as they may seem, or as unlikely, they just don't care and don't. I can't even. I take that back. I'm sure they care, but it's not at the top of their priority list, right? And so that's obviously our job as a vCISO, is really to kind of recategorize and restructure their priority list on, what starts first and go down from there. So definitely some of the difficulties that we deal with.
Yeah. I tend to agree, and I think it goes back to processes, or the lack of processes, basically. So and what I found out is sometimes when some individuals tend to deal with crises, and at some point when they realize that had they have like a better system in place, basically to prevent those crises from ever happening, this is when they start actually putting stuff in place. And security is no difference here, but as you said, I mean, it's definitely out there in terms of like the inherent risk and whatnot. So yeah, I think I agree that that's one of the major challenges here when discussing this with business owners, basically.
Yeah, unfortunately, Ben, one of the things that I say too often is you've got to get burned to learn. Mm-hmm. And that is the theme of what I see day in and day out. It's until they get burned, they don't learn. And even then, I've had experiences where even getting burned, they still don't learn, and it's just not enough. Like they're just willing to take the hit and not take any proactive steps or remediations. It's just, let's just pretend that didn't happen and move on, business as usual. So it's unfortunate, but
yeah, but it happens.
one business at a time.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask a couple of questions about vendors right now. And as an external vendor yourself, and I know you're being part of the organization as a vendor, I'm sure you have to work together with other vendors as well. Do you have any like good advice on how to play well together with other vendors that might even be in some cases like a direct or indirect competitor of yours?
Yeah, like you said, I wouldn't necessarily classify ourselves as a vendor. Being an MSSP, we're really kind of a broker for vendors, right? I mean, we really are the gateway for, external solutions to get into that vendor, if they're being properly managed. But really, and I mean this in the nicest way, and I joke with our salespeople all the time, but really, it's like stop being a salesperson, right? Like your quota is showing, we feel it, the customer feels it, we all kind of understand what our role is in this engagement. Like, let's get over that part. It's, for me, it's about, being an advisor to the customer, even if it means you don't get the sell at that moment, or maybe you're not the right solution, just, providing some sort of, oh, sorry, I just went blank. So you'll have to edit there.
Nice.
So being an advisor to the customer, even if it means you don't get the sell, right? Because building trust goes a long way. And so the customer doesn't really understand to some degree. And so just stepping down from trying to hit that number or hit that goal or get that sell before the end of the quarter, and being an advisor to the customer, even if it's not your solution, it just goes so far. It goes a long way. And it may not be, an immediate gain. And I get it. I've played in sales a little bit, when your livelihood depends on it, and I see this with even my internal salespeople. The second you add a quota to someone for their livelihood, their psychology, their changes, I'd say even their physiology changes, in that now they have this thing again, a fear. And so their brain is more driven on getting that sell with the customer and getting those numbers than actually hearing, and I'm speaking from my own experience, I'm not generalizing, just some of what I hear, that, if you could just step down from that a minute and realize that you're talking to someone that this, it's transactional for the salesperson to some degree, right? It's my job is to do this. It's transactional. Let's get through this. But for the customer, this may be something that impacts their business positively or negatively for the next 3 to 5 years, or whatever it is that they've set that time frame out to. So, really just be an advisor. Stop being salespeople. We all get it. We know you have a quota, and I mean it in the nicest way, but be an advisor to the customer first, and it'll go miles and miles.
Okay, great. And what would you say your biggest challenge is when you start to work with a new customer?
Trust is number one. Mutual trust, right? I mean, that's typically you're coming from a scenario where either you're replacing someone, or that hasn't been doing a great job, or they already have a bad taste in their mouth, and now you're coming in with all your fancy shiny things. And, trust me. So that challenge up front, and establishing that we understand, we get where they're coming from. We're not just trying to, again, be a salesperson and try to get a deal. I mean, obviously that's our livelihood, but really making sure we hit the marks of what it is they're looking for as a partner, and establishing that trust that we're here for the long haul. We're not just trying to make, a quick buck off of them. So after you get over that hurdle, which it really isn't getting over a hurdle, it's throughout the longevity of the life cycle of that relationship, you're always, maintaining that level of trust. But really getting the opportunity to get in and understand their business and their business process, because typically organizations don't look at you as like, you're a seat at the executive table and they are inviting you into their inner workings. You can imagine I come in, they're like, I don't know this guy. He's, this bald, tattooed looking guy. I'm not going to let him into my office and start looking at, our forecasting and, our secrets, so that's difficult and that takes time. And so that, we have a 90-day onboarding process at Simpatico for exactly that reason, because it takes a while. I mean, obviously we can service the customer pretty instantaneously with tools, but to really understand their environment and get a good view, to really come in from, bird's eye down to, much closer, that part is key. And with that comes, understanding the health of their system, and the risks, again, that inherent risk, because you don't know what you're inheriting, right? You come in and they're like, oh yeah, everything's good, and only to find out their servers are 2008. We've got some 2003 small business servers out there, whatever the case may be, some XP machines. So, unfortunately, we've had to set some precedents in our agreements with our customers that if they're not under current contract or warranty, et cetera, we have to, that kind of negates our SLAs, our service level agreements.
What would you say your biggest challenge is when you start working with a new vendor? And I know you mentioned that you're like sort of a broker for vendors. So I'm assuming you have like all kinds of processes in place, but if you can share something about your challenges.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that can relate in the role that we're in. Time is key. I mean, it's huge. That is the biggest challenge is fitting in. You've got your day-to-day stuff. You've got all these things that you've got to do, and finding a moment to like engage in that, which you already know is going to create some overhead for yourself. There's going to be layers of communication that are going to happen. It's just going to be some time that you're going to have to dedicate. I mean, that's number one for me. Number two probably is really trying to get them to understand my specific need. Again, like we talked about before, to step out of that salesperson role and be an advisor, to really understand and put in the effort and time to understand our specific need and not just put me in their box that fits their solution. And that's what it feels like a lot of the time is, that's great that this is what you need, but here's what it does. And trying to make it work when maybe it's not all the way. And granted, I get it. There aren't, to my knowledge, any off-the-shelf solutions that just check every single box that you need checked. I get that. But really, it's at some point you got to realize, is this going to work, or are we trying to make it work? So that's a difficult piece for me. And then in just the current day and age we live in, to really get a feel for that company's level of security hygiene, right? So, depending on if they're a startup, or if they've been around a little while, really to understand what their practices are, what their cyber hygiene is, because essentially every time we bring in a vendor, we're introducing new vectors, new areas of risk, new line items of governance that we need to address, supply chain issues. And so really, and I've had some mixed results of that. I've had some customers, some vendors who have really had the forethought and have put together some really good information that helped me with some confidence in that scenario. And then others that just are, very clueless. And I get, there's a transition happening, and we're very much, changing to a new mindset. But that part's difficult for me because you're really just trusting what they say in a spreadsheet, right? You can ask any number of questions, but you're trusting an answer in a spreadsheet. So that's one of my difficulties as well.
Yeah. And I know we've spoken a bit about your role as a virtual CISO and your challenges. And I wanted to touch a bit about the difference, as you see it, between a full-time CISO and a virtual or a fractional CISO. And I'm assuming your answer will tie into the previous questions as well.
Yeah, good question. And I am, by default, to some degree, I am the CISO for Simpatico Systems. I do fill that role. I'm by no means an enterprise level CISO that would even try to act like I understand what that role entails. I'm very immature in my role as a CISO, and working towards that. But from what I understand and what I hear in the industry and a lot of other seasoned CISOs speak, there's a difference in, especially what we do from that SMB market, the diversity that we have. Typically a CISO is going to be working for a company, an organization, an enterprise, and it's going to be pretty siloed in their vertical. This is what we do. This is what we offer. This is our stuff. Obviously, there's a lot of complexity internally, but the diversity in the different business models, the different business types, the different verticals is a little bit different in that vCISO role than a CISO role. The scale, obviously, like we just talked about. I mean, from a full-time CISO role, the scale of responsibility and depth of knowledge, which is actually my last comment here is the depth of that as well. So scale and depth. There's a lot more going on in the world of a CISO who works at a, let's say, Fortune 500 and not business, or even a large enterprise, as opposed to someone who's talking to someone with 25 users. The scale is much larger. There's a lot more on the plate there. And again, depth, like I said, the depth at which that goes. There's so many pieces and the departments and all the different organizational needs and departmental needs. It's very complex. So diversity, scale, and depth.
Yeah. Okay. And if I were to talk with your customers, what do you think they would say about you? Like, what would they say about the thing they like the most about working with you, and maybe dislike as well?
Oh, yeah, good question. I have to think about myself there for a minute. I would say probably first and foremost, they, like we just talked about earlier with the salespeople, like be an advisor, I really try to make the people I work with feel that I care about them, that I'm trying to connect with them on a human level as a person, that they're not just a customer of mine. They're not just another number. I care about their business and well-being, that I truly care. It's not just a tactic to get their business. So I'd probably say that's number one. Just the being genuine, it would probably be number one. I really take the time with them, and to my own detriment a little bit, of just really making sure they understand what I'm saying, that they understand what I'm conveying to them. And if I have to give 10 analogies for them to understand, I will go to the nth degree to make sure, because if I leave that situation, that conversation, and they don't understand, I haven't done my job. They're going to be left with more questions than answers when I started. So that's key for me. Integrity is key. That's, not doing the right thing. I'm sure you and others listening have had to eat some crow, or take their foot out of their mouth from mistakes they've made, and really just own up. And yeah, I did that. That was me. That was my fault, my responsibility. So integrity is key for me. And lastly, I do what I say I'm going to do. That's a pet peeve of mine. If you say you're going to do something for me, and that anybody listening that wants to work with me, you do what you say you're going to do, or I'm out. That's huge for me. Don't make promises, false, empty promises. Do what you say you're going to do, so that I can. Again, that's about to establishing trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, interesting. What would you who would you say is your ideal customer then?
Ideal customer, myself personally, and Simpatico Systems, I'm speaking on their behalf. We are looking for long-term relationships, and we're not just trying to date, right? We're not dating our customers. We are looking for that long-term relationship. So we are looking for customers who are dedicated to a partnership and value that as part of their own umbrella, their own infrastructure, their own organization. We're looking for customers who understand that value and are looking for that as well. A partner who is that we can build a partnership with, that values our advice, right, about business. So it's not just, oh, I have these guys that are doing IT or security for me. It's, hey, I was thinking about this thing with business and this, and I was wanting to do that. How would that impact me? What do you think about that? What have you seen? Somebody that actually values the the time and effort we've put in, the number of hours of education and CPE credits we continually have to get every year to maintain this level of knowledge, so that we can provide that to them. So that someone that values that, and doesn't treat us like a commodity, right? I mean, there's some organizations who just see us as, and no offense to plumbers or electricians, but that just sees us as a service company. It's like, oh, the air isn't working great. Awesome. Let's call HVAC. Oh, your mouse isn't working. Yeah. Call whatever IT company. That we're not looking for that kind of a thing. We're looking for those businesses who understand the value of IT support, security, governance in their business to help them move forward.
Okay, and yeah, I think I know the answer to my next questions. It derives from the previous one, like what qualities you don't like about the customer. I think I can assume, but if you wanted to give it a go.
Yeah, I mean, really, the antithesis of all of those, but really, I mean, just it kind of irks me with some customers, and this is where I get in trouble of just caring too much. Is the customers that just don't care. They don't care to understand. They don't care about the giving you the time to understand the issues. There's just like this level of disrespect of just treating you like you're this commodity and you're not a person, you're just a service. I can't handle that, right? It's like the devaluation of even at a human level. I can't handle that. I don't care, if someone's sweeping the floors or doing whatever, they're still a person. Give them that level of respect, give them the respect of the effort they put in for what they do. We give that to them, for what they've done, whether they're a doctor, lawyer, CPA, whatever it is that they're doing, or, they may be metal fabricator. I'm not a metal fabricator. I'm going to give them a respect and of what they do that I don't do, but I'm not going to treat them in any lesser manner.
Yeah, and I think for me, from what I'm experiencing, I think it all comes back to the need to keep everything very streamlined. So people, especially the customers, they, as you said, they're after sale after sale after sale. They don't really want to stop. They don't want to understand. And you know what? They might not need to, but I do agree with you that, what I like about your answer is that I do agree with you that, you do need to have some kind of good personal relationship to make this work, because otherwise, if you just treat it as a service that you consume, I mean, people, even though we do provide services, we're not like a SaaS solution. You can't, unplug us or unplug people. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I like that. Exactly.
Yeah. Can't unplug people like in the Matrix.
Yep.
Okay. So if any of our listeners or, potential partners, they want to connect with you online, what's the best way to do it?
I'm pretty antisocial when it comes to my online presence, as you may have found in doing any research on me. I'm anti all of that stuff, but I am on LinkedIn. Just Jeramia Cohen, Jeramia Cohen. Just look me up on LinkedIn, or Simpatico Systems. That's probably the only place you're going to find me.
Okay. Interesting. So I get that you don't have any Facebook. I have to say I didn't do the research on Facebook or any one of those, but I usually don't. But I guess you don't have any Facebook or any one of the newer social media platforms that are out there right now.
No, I don't subscribe to any of that. I very much enjoy my privacy.
Yeah.
Or the perception of my privacy.
Yeah. I think that's the better description. A couple of fun questions to wrap this up with. If you had unlimited funds, or let's just say if money was never an issue, what would you do with your life?
Oh, that's a good question. And I think that goes back to kind of one of my successes in life. I very much at this point value living simply. For me, living simply, off grid, near some water, the ocean preferably. I'm definitely love the ocean. Being from California natively, spending time with my family, just the basic essentials of life. I really have found so much value in that through my experiences. That's key for me. It wouldn't matter the amount of money. It would just give me the flexibility and the ability to just connect with people, just be free. Like I said, it changes your physiology when you're trying to attain something, as opposed to you have and you could just give. and not to be a follower of all of the space travel that's going on with these wealthy people. But I really do have a fascination with space. I'm very much a Star Wars geek. My birthday actually is on May the 4th.
May the 4th be with you.
So, I live that up. But space travel for me, just for perspective, to see our planet from outside of what I've seen it normally would be on my list for sure.
So Star Wars versus Star Trek, right? You're a Star Wars fan.
Star Wars all the way. Although I did watch Star Trek, but I am 100% Star Wars geek.
Okay. Well, I watched both, and I've been watching all 9. I mean, we just finished watching all 9 movies with my kids. I have a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old daughter, and we just finished watching all 9. And it's great. And I've watched the Mandalorian, obviously, so I'm pretty up to speed. But I still prefer Star Trek, like all the all the TV shows, all the series, like Discovery was amazing, Picard was amazing, and even before that, going back to the TNG, Deep Space Nine, all the geeky stuff. I watched it all, even the Lower Decks.
Yeah. Well, not to brag a little bit, but at one point, William Shatner was a customer, a client of mine.
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
Story for another webinar.
Yeah, that's a different story.
Another talk. Yeah.
Might be a more interesting story even. But okay. And just before we end this session, because I know we're almost out of time, do you have any specific, like something that you've read or listened to recently that you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, actually, I just started a new book. I was at a conference here in Dallas for cybersecurity, and there was a gentleman there named Christian Espinoza. He's CEO of an organization called Alpine Security, and he's about 30-year veteran, but he's kind of stepping back a little bit in this book he writes to look at kind of, I think what a lot of us are asking is, why do we still have these issues? Why are we still tackling the same problems? And we're just getting newer, shinier, fancier tools. And so he really dives into kind of the ego of some of the people within this ecosystem. And there's a couple quotes within that I noted here. One of the things he said is, it's the people and their ego that's at the nexus of the industry failing, which is, a pretty powerful statement. And he says, your people and their poor communication skills are the reason your data was stolen, not your lack of cutting edge technology. And so he really looks at how some of these inflated egos within these organizations prevent communication within that organization, and how we're communicating, how we're spending our time, that we could negate some of this stuff. And so it really makes you evaluate what your role is, how you behave, some of the psychology behind it. And so it's really interesting me and seeing, how am I contributing to that, or what we're seeing, because clearly we have an issue that is not being resolved, and it doesn't matter how many tools we come out with. There's still going to be these issues until we can communicate, like we've talked about a number of times through here, properly with each other as humans at a human level, as opposed to my rank or my position and my ego. We're just not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. I would go even a step further and, basically blame mankind in that. But because, it all goes back, like the weakest link is always the human. And poor communication is definitely out there. And, inflated egos is definitely, I've seen that a lot as well. So yeah. I also tend to agree on that. But anyway, I see that we're out of time. I just wanted to take this opportunity and thank you for joining me on this podcast. It seems that we actually have a lot in common. If you could, stick around for a couple of minutes, we can discuss something briefly. But yeah, so just again, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on this podcast. I really enjoyed our talk, and I am sure, some of the tips that you provided here would resonate with some of our listeners. And yeah, I can wish you all the best.
Great, Ben. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the platform. I enjoy talking about this stuff and giving back as much as possible.
Yeah, thank you.